Hey everybody, welcome to Fit Tip Tuesday. Today I'm going to answer a subscriber's question about adding a full bust adjustment to a dartless top. This question came up after my two-part series on how to fit your dart, first getting it in the right position and then making sure your cup had enough room, and if it didn't, you could do a full bust adjustment to create a larger cup. Now with dartless tops, sometimes there is enough room in there for you and sometimes there isn't. Here are some top things to look for, or most common things to look for when you're evaluating the fit of your top that doesn't have a dart. If your side seams through your bust level are pulling forward, or if it looks like the fabric on your sides are grabbing towards your bust and you have all of this wrinkles here pulling front to back on the sides, that's an indication that you could need a bigger, more room for your bust. If you have stress wrinkles across your bust from apex to apex, that's another indication you need more room in your top. And then if you're working with a woven garment, typically what will happen is if your bust is too tight, you end up with a wrinkle or like extra fabric that looks like there should be a dart going into your armhole. So it's sort of it's like a wrinkle pointing down to your bust from your armhole. That's another indication that you don't have enough room in your top. So I'm going to show you how to add full bust room without creating a dart in the end. So in front of me here, you can see I did a mock-up of it already. So this is the top half. And you can see, whenever I see this, it's almost like, those commercials where the football team comes busting through the banner at the beginning of the game and, all that force and impact breaks the banner. Well, when I look at a full bust adjustment, to me, that looks like the paper spreading or breaking where the bust needs the room. Okay, so you can see here, I've added vertical room and horizontal or width to the pattern. So typically, if you have a larger bust size and you need more bust room, it's not just about letting the pattern out, it's also about creating more vertical room. Now, how much of a bust adjustment or how much room you need to add, the easiest way to tell that is to look and see if your side seams are pulling forward, kind of get a basic measurement for how much that is. So let's say it's pulling forward 3/8, a half an inch on each side. Okay, that's going to give you an indication that you need more width to let the side seams lay straight. Also, you can look at the hem of your shirt at your center front and see if it's picking up. So if your hem is not straight across your center front, that's an indication that you need more vertical length. So for this example, I'm going to keep it simple and say that we need a half an inch to make our side seams lay straight and relax wrinkles across the full bust, let's say. And then let's say that we also need a half an inch to get the hem to hang straight at the bottom. So we're going to just work with a half an inch here. Keep in mind, it could be whatever measurement that you need. If the amount you need to adjust is more than 3/4 of an inch, I highly recommend doing this adjustment, truing everything up, and then doing it again. Because I found that breaking up really large adjustments can help you maintain the shape and the grain of your pattern. So this is the example. And the one thing I want to show you here is you see I drew a circle approximating the position of the bust. So the first thing we're going to do to our pattern is we are going to measure down from our shoulder to where our apex is. All right, so that measurement we need to know because when we do our full bust adjustment to a dartless tee, we want to put that extra where we need it. So for me, I'm going to go with 11 inches Okay, so let me show you how to mark that on your pattern. First thing I'm going to do is measure down from the center of my shoulder down 11 inches. Now this isn't a super full-size pattern, so it's going to look a little out of proportion here, but basically if I measure down 11 inches, that's approximately where my apex is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a 6-inch circle to indicate the position of my bust. And I find that it's really helpful to have this as sort of a guide. So I'm just going to mark the end of my ruler around here, having the 3 inches be the middle of my circle. And this is just going to give us a visual guide for where our bust is positioned. Okay, so here is the position of our bust. So that gives us the location of where we're going to do our full bust adjustment. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line approximately, 3/4 to an inch below my circle, and I'm going to cut my pattern off there because I don't want to affect the bottom of the pattern, so we don't need that for right now. So I'm just going to put that aside. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark some guidelines. Okay, so we are going to draw a line across our apex like this. And we're also going to draw a line from the front notch, so let's pretend our front notch is right here, down to our apex. So now we have all of the guidelines we need. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to, I also need to cut through below the apex because we're going to spread one side and we're going to pivot the other. So I'm going to create a pivot at my side seam. Remember, we can't lengthen the front side seam because it still needs to agree with the back side seam. So we need to keep this a similar length. So now that I've cut this apart here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spread the center front edge of my pattern a 1/2 inch. So basically I'm just going to tape it down like this. I'm going to measure, I'm just going to fold this out of the way for now, put this over here. I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to continue my center front edge here to make it really easy to tape this back into position. So now you can see I can just put this right back here. And what I've done is I've added a 1/2 inch of vertical length to the center front of my pattern. Okay, so that's the first step. Now that I have that all set, I'm going to slash through my diagonal and make a pivot into the armhole. And what I'm going to do there is I'm also going to spread that a 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to stick my little sticky note under here. I really like using sticky notes because it makes it very easy for me to show you guys what the changes are. So I'm going to spread this a 1/2 inch, and where am I measuring? Down here at the bottom of the slash. So if I were to just add a piece of tape here, I could then measure a 1/2 inch like this. Okay, and then I'm going to just tape that in place. So you can see I've added that 1/2 inch that I need to allow the side seam to straighten out, let's say, or relax the stress wrinkles across my bust there. Now, the remaining piece I have left is the slash from the apex to the side seam. I'm going to create a pivot here, and I'm just going to spread that a 1/2 inch as well. So let me go ahead and put some paper here. And I'm going to spread it 1/2 inch. Tape it down so you can see. So where am I spreading it a 1/2 inch? Right here. So I've got my 1/2 inch here, I've got 1/2 inch here, and I've got 1/2 inch here. But notice the side seam is staying the same, but also notice my side seam is tracking off into a more of a flared shape there. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to take the base of our pattern, and I am going to line it right back up with, with the center front. And I want to make sure, the most important thing here is my center front needs to stay completely straight, because if I'm cutting out my t-shirt on the fold, let's say, we want to make sure that this is straight and agreeing with each other, so that my center front is completely straight. And then I'm just going to tape back my center front edge. Okay, so my center front is put back to its regular straight edge. Okay, so you can see now we have this little issue right here where the side seam is, we added 3/4 of an inch to the side seam, and you can see there is a huge discrepancy now between the side seam at above the adjustment and below the adjustment. So here's the cool thing about this. Number one, by the time you get below your bust, we don't need the room that we added in here. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to dash in a side seam that will blend back to up here, and it's going to come out just a little bit like this, so it's going to have a slight curve to it. Okay, so see that right there? All right, so we've got the shape of that here. Okay, and it's got a little bit of a curve to it, because we don't want to get rid of the amount that we're adding in here. We need this amount, but we don't need this down here. So that takes care of shaping our side seam. The next step is, we've got this 3/4 of an inch difference between the front and the back. So what I recommend doing here is, I'm going to actually just take off at the bottom of the pattern. I am just going to take off half of that. So 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to draw myself a little line there, and then I'm just going to blend myself back to the full length that I need at center front. So I'm just going to create a slight shape here. Okay, so I've gotten rid of half of what I added over here. Okay, and so then what I'm going to do is, let me just pretend, I'm going to draw here. Let's pretend this is the side seam of the back. Okay, so this would be my front side seam. This will be my back. So if I shorten 3/8 here, I'm just going to lengthen 3/8 here so it will sew together. And that's a small adjustment. By splitting it up and splitting the difference, it's not going to be noticeable. Okay, so I would just, bring that back to the original. There. So I'm adding here, I'm minusing there. That takes care of this difference right here. Okay. Now the next thing that we have to deal with is, because I added some curve in here, we need to make note of that and ease in this little bit of extra that we've created up here at the top when we sew the front and back side seams together. And the way you can very easily do that is if you measure up from the hem to, I would say, maybe 3 inches below the apex level. So somewhere right here, measure that distance. So for me, it's 10.5 inches. I'm going to put a dot there. Okay, and then I already put a dot here in about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 below the armhole, here to here. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to mark, and let me just continue with my, let's pretend the back side seam is right here. So I'm just going to continue this up. Okay, so here's my back side seam. Let me just clean this up a little bit here. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so what you're going to do, let's pretend this is my back armhole. Okay, so you can see it. This is my back. This is my front. I'm going to make matching notches on my side seams, and I'm going to measure up that distance 10.5 inches. And you're going to notice what's going to happen is you're going to see that the amount in the front is going to be slightly longer than the amount in the back between those dots. So if you're measuring from the hem up and from the armhole down equally, then the difference that you added by curving your side seam in the front will be between those notches. So when you sew it together, you're going to match those notches and just ease this in. And if you're working with a knit garment, you'll just be able to stretch the back to match the front. If you're working with a woven fabric, a woven pattern, you may need to put a couple rows of gathering stitches in there and just pull it up to match. But you want to make sure that you're not creating any actual gathers. You're just easing in that extra. And that will be super helpful if you have a large bust and your fullness on the sides going towards your side seams. That will add that little bit more room you need in there to create a nice smooth fit. So we've done all of this without adding a dart. We've created room for your bust. We've added a little shape to the side seam to help with that. And then we made very small adjustments to our hem by splitting the total amount that we added to the side seam here, shortening the front 3/8, adding 3/8 to the back to get the total of 3/4 inch. This is why I highly recommend splitting up the adjustment if it's more than 3/4 inch, because now that this is all trued up, you can walk your seams. And when I say walk seams, what I mean by that is, let me just show you. You literally would cut out, well, your side seam wouldn't be attached to one piece of paper like mine here, but basically what you're going to do here is start at the hem, walk up to the bottom notch, and those should match. Okay, so after you get there, just match up the upper notch or dot that you made with each other, and then just make sure that the distance is the same from that top notch to the armhole. That's how you know your side seams are going to sew together properly. All right, so I hope that this little tutorial will help you add room to your dartless tops. If you have a D+ cup, look and see what your hem is doing in terms of how much It's picking up at center front. That will give you a good indication of how much length you need to add. Check your side seams and see if they're pulling forward. And that's the amount you're going to want to spread it horizontally to add room across your bust. If you have any questions or comments, please post those below and I will help you. I hope to see everybody on Friday. I will be starting a brand new project this Friday during FabFit Friday. So I hope you'll all join me for that. And thank you so much for watching and have a lovely rest of your day.